The morning mist clung heavily to the asphalt, shrouding the convoy in an eerie haze that seemed almost alive. The air was thick with tension as we prepared for what should have been a routine. Prisoner transport, a task I had trained months for, but still felt woefully unprepared to lead. Officer Matthews, that's me, wasn't just another handler. I was the son of a legend, or at least that's how everyone saw it. My father, the man who built this canine unit from scratch, cast a shadow so large it threatened to swallow me whole. Every glance Lieutenant Davidson shot my way carried the weight of doubt, his piercing eyes silently accusing me of being nothing more than a name on a roster, a position earned through nepotism rather than merit. Courage, my German Shepherd partner, sat beside me, his amber eyes sharp and unwavering despite the palpable anxiety radiating off me. He didn't need words to know something was wrong. He could feel it too, though he masked it better than I ever could. As the convoy rolled forward into the desolate highway, the silence between us felt deafening. Each mile stretched longer than the last, the hum of engines doing little to drown out the storm brewing inside my head. Lieutenant Davidson's voice crackled or radioed during routine checks, each syllable clipped and cold, like shards of ice slicing through the quiet. Tail position secure, I responded mechanically, stealing a glance at Courage in the rearview mirror. His calm demeanor only deepened my unease. How could he remain so composed while every nerve in my body screamed disaster? But then the first sign of trouble emerged not from the prisoners, not from the road ahead, but from within me. A bead of sweat trickled down my temple as I wrestled with the annoying certainty that something wasn't right. Courage suddenly shifted in his seat, his ears perking up with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I knew him better than anyone else. This wasn't excitement or restlessness, it was warning. And before I could process what was happening, the world around us began to unravel. As the convoy rolled deeper into the desolate countryside, the landscape transformed into an eerie expanse of endless farmland and dense forests. The morning mist had lifted slightly, but its ghostly remnants clung stubbornly to the fields, casting long, distorted shadows across the road. It was here on this isolated stretch of highway, miles away from any sign of civilization, that Courage's behavior took a drastic turn. One moment, he sat calmly in his compartment, his amber eyes scanning the horizon with practiced precision. The next, he erupted into a frenzy of barking so intense it seemed to shake the very air around them. His body tense like a coiled spring, every muscle vibrating with urgency as he lunged toward the front of the vehicle, his focus locked unerringly on the transport van ahead. "Courage, quiet," Matthews commanded sharply, his voice tinged with confusion and growing unease. But the dog didn't even glance at him. Instead, Courage let out another piercing bark, louder and more insistent than before, his sharp cries slicing through the otherwise silent countryside. The sound echoed eerily down the empty highway, bouncing off the trees and creating an unsettling symphony of chaos. Lieutenant Davidson's voice crackled over the radio almost immediately, his tone dripping with irritation. "Tail position, what the hell is going on back there?" "Control your animal, Officer Matthews." Matthews felt his face flush hot under the weight of Davidson's reprimand. "Sir, my canine is alerting to something I'm trying to determine." "Control your dog." Davidson interrupted coldly, his words cutting through the transmission like a knife. "That racket is unprofessional and distracting. You're compromising this entire operation." The pressure mounted as Courage continued to ignore both his handler and the lieutenant's demands. His barks grew more frantic, each one reverberating through the tense atmosphere like a warning bell, tolling for disaster. Inside the transport van, the prisoners began to react to the commotion. Their voices rose above the din, some shouting insults, others laughing mockingly at Matthew's predicament. "What's wrong, Ricky? Can't handle your mutt?" One of the gang leaders taunted, his voice laced with venom. Another prisoner chimed in, "Looks like Daddy's little boy doesn't know how to train a dog after all." Even among the officers, whispers of derision started to spread. Someone muttered sarcastically over the radio, "Maybe he saw a squirrel," while another added with a chuckle, "Or maybe the dog just needs a bathroom break." Matthews clenched his jaw, fighting back the wave of humiliation threatening to overwhelm him. He could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on him, their skeptical stares burning into the back of his skull. Yet, despite the mounting criticism, he couldn't shake the gnawing certainty that Courage's behavior wasn't random. Something about the way the dog's eyes were fixed on the transport van sent shivers crawling up his spine. This wasn't excitement or disobedience. This was something far darker. "Courage, heel!" Matthews tried again, his voice firmer now, but the command fell flat. Courage responded by throwing his entire weight against the barrier of his compartment, his movements desperate and frenzied. The dog's amber eyes glowed with an intensity that bordered on primal, as though he were trying to communicate something beyond words. Matthews glanced at the mirror, locking eyes with Courage for a brief moment. In that fleeting exchange, he saw not rebellion but purpose, a singular focus that reminded him of everything his father had taught him about trusting his partner's instincts. But the situation was spiraling out of control. Davidson's voice returned, colder and sharper than ever. "Last warning, Matthews. Get that dog under control, or I swear to God." The threat hung unfinished in the air, heavy with implication. Meanwhile, Courage's barking reached a fever pitch, filling the void between the vehicles with a cacophony of alarm. The once routine mission had devolved into pandemonium, and Matthews knew he was running out of time to prove himself, not just to Davidson, but to the entire team. The heavy metal door of the transport van swung open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing rows of prisoners secured to their seats by layers of restraints. The dim interior cast long shadows across the faces of men who had spent years behind bars, their expressions ranging from boredom to defiance. Lieutenant Davidson stepped inside, his posture rigid as he began counting them off one by one. Matthews remained outside with Courage, whose earlier frantic barking had now shifted into an eerie silence, his body tense, eyes locked on something specific within the van. It was then that Matthews noticed it. Ray Donner, prisoner 6, sat near the rear where the overhead light had burned out, shrouded in darkness. His calm demeanor stood out starkly against the other's visible unease. "6," Davidson called out, his voice clipped and professional. "Present and accounted for," came Donner's smooth reply. But there was something unsettling about his tone, a calculated confidence that sent chills down Matthews' spine. As Davidson moved closer to inspect Donner's restraints, his sharp eyes caught sight of something alarming. The cuffs around Donner's wrists were loose. "Your cuffs are compromised," Davidson stated coldly, his hand instinctively moving toward his radio. "How did this happen?" Donner smiled slowly, a predator's grin spreading across his face. "Just got lucky, I guess." But luck had nothing to do with it. Before anyone could react, Donner moved with terrifying precision. His supposed immobility was a lie. He'd been planning this moment for weeks. In a flash, his arms shot forward, one grabbing Davidson's weapon, the other clamping around the lieutenant's throat like a vice. "Nobody move!" Donner barked, dragging Davidson backward into the narrow confines of the van. The metallic click of the safety being released echoed through the air, freezing everyone in place. "Back away from the door or the lieutenant gets ventilated." Donner's voice carried the icy calm of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Officers Jenkins and Reyes immediately drew their weapons, but the confined space made any shot impossible without risking Davidson's life. Matthews felt sweat pouring down his temples, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst through his chest. Every fiber of his being screamed to act, yet he couldn't risk escalating the situation further. Courage, sensing the gravity of the moment, pressed closer to Matthews. His muscles coiled tightly as if ready to spring at a command. Inside the van, Donner maneuvered himself strategically, using Davidson as both shield and bargaining chip. "Here's how this works," Donner announced, his voice dripping with arrogance. "I want the keys to the lead car, a clear path out of here, and no pursuit for 30 minutes. Simple." Matthews exchanged a glance with Jenkins, who gave a reluctant nod. Moving cautiously, Matthews stepped into the open, stopping 15 feet from the van. "That's far enough," Donner snapped, pressing the barrel of the gun harder against Davidson's temple. The lieutenant's face remained stoic despite the pressure on his neck, his jaw clenched tightly. Matthews could see beads of sweat forming on Davidson's forehead, evidence of the unbearable tension gripping them all. Donner's gaze flicked between Matthews, Courage, and the surrounding officers, his mind calculating every possible outcome. "Your dog sensed something was wrong, didn't he?" Donner sneered, his tone mocking yet tinged with curiosity. "Smart animal. Smarter than most people give him credit for." Matthews didn't respond immediately, his trained eyes assessing the hostage situation while his mind raced through tactical options. He knew time wasn't on their side. The longer they stalled, the more desperate Donner would become. The standoff had stretched into an eternity, each second pounding in Matthew's ears like a war drum. His heart hammered so loudly he feared Donner could hear it. The weight of the decision before him pressed down like a leaden sky trust, Courage's instincts and risk everything, or follow protocol and potentially lose Davidson forever. Every fiber of his training screamed at him to maintain order, to wait for backup, to avoid escalating the situation. But something primal, something deeper than procedure, told him this was their only chance. Matthew's eyes flickered between Donner's gun hand, the keys glinting on the asphalt, and Courage, who remained hidden in the shadows beneath the transport van. He knew what he had to do. As Donner leaned forward slightly to grab the keys, his focus momentarily shifted from Davidson's throat to the ground below. It was the smallest window, an opening no wider than a heartbeat, but Matthews seized it with every ounce of courage he possessed. His fingers snapped once, a sharp, almost imperceptible sound that carried across the tense silence like a whisper. To anyone else, it might have been mistaken for the rustle of leaves or the creak of metal. But to Courage, it was a clarion call. From the darkness under the van, Courage exploded into action like a bolt of lightning. No bark, no growl, just 70 pounds of pure, calculated precision hurtling through the air. The world seemed to slow as Donner's peripheral vision caught the blur of movement too late. Before he could react, Courage's jaws clamped down on his gun arm with surgical accuracy. The force was enough to incapacitate but not mutilate, a testament to years of rigorous training. Donner let out a guttural scream, his grip on the weapon faltering as pain shot through his arm. The gun discharged harmlessly into the sky, its echo reverberating through the desolate highway. Davidson didn't hesitate. In that fraction of a second when Donner's attention wavered, the lieutenant drove his elbow backward into the prisoner's solar plexus with brutal efficiency. The impact sent Donner stumbling backward, loosening his stranglehold just enough for Davidson to break free. As the lieutenant rolled clear, Matthews surged forward, closing the distance in 3 rapid strides. His mind raced, calculating angles and timing, ensuring that Courage maintained dominance over Donner's weapon arm. Donner thrashed wildly, trying to shake off the dog's relentless grip, but Courage held firm, applying consistent pressure that rendered the arm immobile without causing permanent damage. Matthews saw his moment and took it. He delivered a precise strike to Donner's shoulder, further destabilizing the man's balance. With a final desperate attempt to resist, Donner collapsed face down onto the pavement, his free arm splayed uselessly beside him. Face down. Other arm behind your back? Matthews barked, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Donner complied, his breathing ragged and uneven. Matthews gave the command, "Courage out." Instantly, the German shepherd released his grip, backing up 3 steps while maintaining an unwavering focus on the prisoner, ready to re-engage if necessary. The scene shifted rapidly as officers swarmed in, securing Donner with reinforced restraints and treating his injured arm. Blood seeped through his sleeve where Courage's teeth had left controlled punctures, but the wound was deliberate, a calculated neutralization rather than a reckless attack. Matthews exhaled sharply, his body trembling with adrenaline as the reality of what had just transpired began to sink in. He glanced at Courage, whose amber eyes gleamed with quiet pride, and allowed himself a brief moment of gratitude. The capture of Ray Donner marked the end of a harrowing ordeal, but as the dust settled and details emerged, the magnitude of his plan sent shivers down everyone's spines. Hidden in the shadows of his calculated escape was a chilling revelation. Donner hadn't acted alone. A team of accomplices disguised as highway maintenance workers had been stationed at the county line, their equipment strategically placed to block traffic and create chaos once Donner reached them. The precision with which he orchestrated the operation spoke volumes about his military training and his ruthlessness. If Courage hadn't alerted when he did, Davidson admitted during debriefing, his voice heavy with uncharacteristic vulnerability, we'd be looking at multiple casualties, possibly even deaths. The thought hung ominously in the air, a grim reminder of how close they'd come to disaster. Davidson's acknowledgement of his earlier skepticism toward Matthews and Courage carried an unexpected weight. For years, he had adhered strictly to protocol, viewing K-9 units as tools rather than partners. But now, standing amidst the aftermath of what could have been a massacre, he couldn't deny the truth. "Your father taught me more than I wanted to learn," Davidson confessed, his tone softer than usual. He always said that the bond between handler and dog is sacred, that it transcends orders and instincts. Today proved him right. With visible resolve, Davidson announced plans to overhaul the department's K-9 training program, incorporating methods pioneered by Matthew's late father. "From now on, we train for partnership, not obedience. Lives depend on it." For Matthews, recognition came swiftly but bittersweetly. The chief personally commended him during a formal ceremony, presenting him with a commendation pin while praising his courage and quick thinking. Yet beneath the accolades lay a sobering realization. His decision to stop the convoy, based solely on Courage's alert, had gambled with lives, including those of his fellow officers. As he stood beside Courage later that evening, watching the sunset from the hilltop cemetery where his father rested, Matthews allowed himself a rare moment of introspection. "We were lucky today," he murmured, running his fingers over the cold granite headstone. "That luck isn't something we can count on forever." Courage leaned into him, his warm presence grounding Matthews in the present. In that quiet moment, surrounded by memories of his father and the silent promise of future challenges, Matthews understood one thing clearly. Trust wasn't just a word, it was a lifeline. The bond between Matthews and Courage wasn't just a partnership, it was a lifeline, forged through years of shared trust and mutual understanding. In the heat of that fateful morning, when logic screamed at Matthews to follow protocol, and every instinct told him to obey his superior, it was Courage's unwavering certainty that tipped the scales. The dog's amber eyes, sharp with purpose, had spoken louder than any human voice could. It wasn't simply about training or commands. It was something deeper, almost primal, an unspoken connection that transcended words. As Matthews reflected on the events later, he realized how close they'd come to disaster because of hesitation. Every second wasted questioning Courage's instincts might have cost lives, Davidson's included. Courage hadn't acted out of excitement or disobedience, but from an innate ability to sense danger before anyone else could. That moment when the German shepherd lunged toward the transport van, his barking piercing through the quiet countryside, wasn't random chaos, it was precision born from instinct. And while others doubted, mocked, or dismissed Courage's behavior, Matthews chose to listen. He trusted not only the dog's training, but also the invisible thread that bound them, a bond stronger than fear, doubt, or authority. Their relationship was more than handler and canine. It was symbiosis, a perfect harmony where each relied on the other without question. When Courage locked onto Ray Donner's threat, his body coiled like a spring ready to strike. Matthews understood immediately what needed to be done. There was no need for verbal communication, no time for explanations. Their actions flowed seamlessly as if choreographed by fate itself. This unity saved lives, proving that sometimes survival depends less on strategy and more on faith in oneself, in one's partner, and in the inexplicable pull of it. As the dust settled, Matthews couldn't help but marvel at how Courage seemed to anticipate every move Donner made. From the first bark to the final takedown, the dog operated with a clarity and focus that defied explanation. Even now, as Courage sat calmly beside him during debriefings, there was an aura of quiet confidence around him, a reminder that true courage isn't loud or boastful. It's steady, dependable, and rooted in trust. For Matthews, this day marked not just a turning point in his career, but also a reaffirmation of everything his father had taught him, that animals aren't tools, they're partners, equals, and often the heroes we don't deserve.